heartbreaking story of the prodigal son is one of the best-known parables in the Bible, and our guest today has lived it. Amy Jackson was the prodigal daughter, slipping deep into a life of constant drinking, hard drugs, and illicit sex. During those years, her mom, Sharon, never stopped praying, believing for that elusive miracle. Amy and Sharon join us now on the couch. Welcome, ladies.
Thanks.
So good to have you. Okay, now, Amy, we want to start with you. Okay, because you were raised in a God-fearing home, yes, a godly home. What started you down that slippery slope?
I think for me, as we were talking before, it had a lot to do with my self-image and my self-esteem, and it was really low and not there. And my parents' faith was wonderful, and I could see that, but I never took it as my own. I never made it my own, and I didn't really connect with it. I just sort of observed everything from the outside. And so when you do that, it's hard to find an anchor to your life. And I didn't have that. And like I said, I had low self-esteem, and I just started caring more about what other people would think of me than what I thought of myself.
So how old were you when this started?
I started getting into drugs and drinking probably around 16 or 15 in there.
So I'm sure a lot of parents are listening to this going, this is my biggest fear, like, you know, like, how do I get my kids connected to my faith? I've had these amazing experiences with God. Any advice to parents about how to connect their kids young or keep them connected?
Well, I mean, obviously that's a great question. I don't know, not being a parent, but I mean, certainly making your faith an everyday thing, certainly talking about what God's doing on a day-to-day basis in your life with your kids, and, you know, getting them involved in, hey, you know, what did God do in your life today type thing. But, you know, even with perfect parenting, there's no guarantee that your child will be, like, it's not a fault per se of the parenting, right? That was my own decision.
But that's how you internalize it, isn't it? I just, because I know that, you know, I was also a prodigal daughter, and I think my parents just thought they were just bad parents. They had done something wrong, and they own everything, and so as a result, it creates this kind of performance checklist.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, you do. Where did I go wrong? How did we change things? Did we change anything? Like, how could we have prevented this from happening? Deep in your heart, you do know, though, it is the person's own choice, but you have to come to that understanding. I think it's hard to get there at first.
Amy, listen, you're a pretty girl. You really are. And what would make you think that you're not good enough? All throughout the book, you're like, I wasn't good enough being me. Right? Here you have great parents, you have a great foundation, but yet you still could not get in your mind and in your heart that you were good enough.
And you know, I'm not really sure where that stemmed from. That's just I think a lie that was playing in my head, was that, I wasn't good enough to fit in anywhere. I felt that, you know, I should be smarter or stronger or better at something or prettier. And, you know, and it's just a lie I kind of rolled with. You know?
So what role did drugs play in your life then? How did that answer that?
Well, because then I felt I fit in somewhere. Then I found these friends that were doing that, and hey, I could do that too, and therefore now I'm a part of a group or a part of, you know, a friendship, and so it kind of led me to that road, I think.
And Sharon, how are you processing all this? Because, you know, you're a good Christian parent. You never expected to be parenting a prodigal, I'm sure.
No.
You know, so how did you start to process this with God?
It was difficult because, like I said, we had to get past the shame, actually, when we began to understand more and more of her lifestyle, because at first we thought it wasn't that bad. And as we were exposed to more and more, the shame and the heartbreak, it's heartbreaking to have a daughter that's living that life. And you want to reach out and you want to say things and you want to tell them to come back. But, you know, really, God just told me basically just to love her unconditionally the way he loves me. Let him speak to her, because if I'm always talking to her, always nagging, always preaching, which I wanted to do, then how would she hear God's voice?
And as a parent, I mean, I can speak into that. When you see your child kind of making decisions, making choices that are not the best, and you know, you can see ahead, and you know where it's going to lead. But they don't necessarily know that. They just see the moment, the moment where it fits. And how do you put that guard over your mouth and say, okay, I'm not going to say anything, or God, just give me the right words to say just a little bit, and then trust that you're going to lead her. Like, how do you do that?
A lot of prayer. But seriously, if it was just me alone in that, you know, I messed up enough times anyway. I mean, you're not perfect. There's no perfect parenting. I can remember her coming and sitting at the kitchen table, and I could see the conflict playing on her face. And she even said one time, it's like there's a war going on inside me, and I'm already to jump in and talk about Paul, and God just kind of said, no, just let her talk. Listen and let her talk.
But Sharon, you had to come to a place in your book, I think one of the most profound lines was you said, did I trust God with Amy? And do I trust God with everything? Because that's always the question. It's like we want to hold tight that I want to control my children, I want to control my life, my marriage, my family. But you actually had to be like let go and trust God with her.
Cut the strings.
Cut the strings. Exactly, exactly.
And when we found out her lifestyle, we actually sat down, we prayed, we asked God for counsel and direction. We sat down at the kitchen table, her dad and I and Amy, and we said, you need to make a choice. You can't continue this lifestyle in our home, so you have to make a choice. We gave her 2 weeks to choose, and we prayed desperately. And I was praying, don't let her go, because we can help her more here. And when we got back to the table and asked for her decision, she said, I'm already looking at apartments. And I knew then it was my point to say, okay, God, I have to let her go. I have to take my hands off, because when we dedicated her to God, we gave her to Him, right? And He reminded me, you gave her to me, now you have to trust me to take care of her life.
Amy, I have to ask you, what is going on in your head at this time when you have your parents sitting there? And surely, and I think we can all relate to this, we knew we were breaking our parents' hearts. And there's a tremendous guilt that comes, right? But absolutely. What was this conflict going on?
Well, I think too, for leaving, I mean, I wanted to escape because, like you say, you know what's wrong, and I wanted to escape that. I wanted to be out on my own without this, sense of what I'm doing is wrong, and so I tried to run away from that, right? And I could run away from my parents' voice, okay, but not the voice of God.
Did that kind of feel like a betrayal a little bit, because you were already feeling kind of rejected, and you had those esteem issues, and then when your parents gave you that ultimatum, were you angry? Did you feel hurt?
Know what? I wasn't at all, because they had always loved me unconditionally, and they had always done it, and I knew what they were saying was right.
And we did say when she left, we said, our door is always open. You can come home anytime. Nothing you ever do will be so bad that you can't come home.
So how old were you at this time, Amy?
I think I was 19.
But the struggle as a girl, so you have the love of your life break up. Right? And I think that was interesting in your book where you said, young people really do feel love. Sometimes we tend to discount it like that's just puppy love or that doesn't count, but you actually felt deep love, and then there was the breakup. And I know for myself that you fill those voids when you're feeling rejected or not good enough with drugs, with other boys, with promiscuity, with drinking, with smoking, with all those things to fill, because you need something to fill that void. And yet you realize that you can keep doing that all your life and it will never ever fulfill you. Ever.
It's a vicious circle. And then the more you do that, the more shame and guilt you feel for doing that, and it just continues on itself.
So what turned you around? Like how far did it go?
Unfortunately, it went further than, of course, it always does. And that's the thing when you step onto that road, is you always go further down than you ever intend to go, or you ever think you will go. And it got to the point where I was drinking every night, getting drunk every night. I was using cocaine, ecstasy, anything like that, like you said, just to dull the pain, just to, put an end to that. And one of my worst parts was actually when I was down in that, I became pregnant, and listened to some more of those lies that, you can't have a child because you're addicted to drugs, and I did have an abortion, and then depression really took over me, and from that point it was a very quick downward spiral.
So you've done the unforgivable sin probably in your own mind. All these other sins led up to this, what you would have considered a big sin. How did you then find your way back?
God is faithful and gracious and merciful. And you know what? It is a lie to think that you've gone too far, or that you've done too much, or that you've become so filthy that God won't take you back, because He will. And He wants you back, and He misses you. And He kept telling me those things. He kept telling me, just, you're meant for something more. This life, curled up in a little ball on your apartment floor crying is not what you're meant for. No one's meant for that. We're all meant for better.
And just what Denise said, it's that war, because there's one part that says, you have to cut the strings, like your book has said, of the lies from the enemy that's saying that you're not good enough, and then embrace the truth that you're never far gone, that God's arms are that big to always bring you home. And I think that has to do a lot with prayer and unconditional love as well from your parents.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, once you did make that decision, though, to come back to God and to really own your own faith, how did you deal with the guilt? Because that's another thing, right?
It is. And you know what? It's not an overnight thing. It's a process. It is definitely a process. And little by little, I was able to sort of dig up that wound, you know, from that experience, and little by little hand it over to God. And as I handed it over little by little, you know, he would give me more mercy and more grace, and I would be able to come to terms with things.
And when you say that, do you mean by, did you pray? Did you meet with people?
Yeah, I just talked. I just, you know, I talked to God about it. Now, I did seek out trustworthy people that I could communicate with, because I think it's important to have friends that can help you share that burden.
Yeah,
you know, and the right people. So. Yeah.
And Sharon, I appreciated so much your journey too, because so many parents are doing this now or have done it. You're trusting God with her, and I know that God spoke to you and he said, I'm going to bring your daughter home. You need to trust me. And so even when it looked bad, you were working at that. And Amy finally said, I'm coming back to God. And then you got a phone call from the police, what, about 3 weeks later? Tell me about that.
It wasn't over.
Shocking. When we saw her walk down the aisle, I mean, I thought, this is it. Praise the Lord. Our prodigal is home.
Happy
Life is going to go on.
Right.
All is fine.
All is fine.
And then she comes home, and we find out she's been in jail, and you know, wow. And the one thing I thought, knowing my daughter and in her, you know, this desire to be better, faster, quicker, and all that. If you'd asked me what the defining moment of her life would be, I would never have said a jail cell, because I would have thought she thought, I can handle this. This is good, you know, I can do this. But that God knew her and knew the point she had to come to, and the point that would be her defining moment to really give up that life and come back to Him. Even though she'd made the commitment publicly, there was still that process. And there's something, you know, when prodigal children come home, we have to make sure we allow the process for some of that stuff to drop away. They're not just going to come and be perfect. And if we lose faith in them or don't encourage them in that process, how can they make it, you know?
Amy came back to God, but then slipped back, and it's a journey. How did you learn to trust Amy again?
I think God just opened my heart. I think the hardest thing I had to handle was her not coming back to us, and before she had the abortion, I remember saying to her, honey, we would have done anything to help you. We would have kept the baby. We would have, and that broke my heart. But I know she was, you know, being lied to by the enemy. I understand that. But from our perspective, that hurts so much that she couldn't have just come home, because we loved her so much.
What's your relationship like now?
Amazing.
Yeah, it is so good.
We have so much fun together. We really do.
It is. We had a lot of fun writing too.
We certainly did. We're two different temperaments.
It's a beautiful book, you know, and I want to come back to that point that you said about people coming back to God, or I think people coming to God initially. It's not always a smooth journey, and a lot of people are afraid to come to faith because they think they have to clean up their life first and then come to faith. And you know what? This whole thing is a journey. I think people need to realize that we need to express this better. Come as you are, wherever you are, whatever you've done. And then, you know, as you fall in love with God, He starts taking those desires away from you. It's not like something you have to work at and be perfect. It's like you start losing the desire to do it. You know, He starts doing the work. So I think, if we could communicate anything out of today, it's like, come as you are, and then ask God to change you. And then watch Him do it and just get to know Him. It's not that hard. That's right. But we need to be patient, even as people of faith, with the journey.
But you have to make the choice to start.
That's right. And I just want to encourage you watching today. Maybe you're saying, I need to start. I need to turn my life around. It is really bad. Or I've got someone in my life I've been praying for, and I don't know where they are. I just need help. If you want to pray with someone, our prayer line is available there to you on the screen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We would love to pray with you and maybe help you connect with the God who loves you so much, who can give you that brand new start that you know that you need. So please give our prayer lines a call.